the amendment to the Accountant Act in 2008, which we actually work with, and we appreciate. You must have your members in places to get some of these things done. We have registered over 35,000 members in our register, both in private to the Act, and then the second bit we have done the regulation, the accountant regulations 2022, the quality 2022, and the examinations rules 2022, because our act is together with that of the examination board, CASNEP, so those who know CASNEP. So that has been the journey that we have moved, and the regulations have made it easier for us to be able to work together with CASNEP, and also to have our global presence and curb other litigations that would have arisen that we are operating without regulations. The core mandate of the Institute is to promote standards of professional competence, promote research in the areas of accountancy, finance, and also to promote international recognition of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, advise the Minister in charge of Finance on matters relating to financial accountability in all sectors of the economy, and more importantly also, we sit on the board of CASNEP, the Kenya National Examinations Board, related to training of accountants and secretaries, including the CPSS. Those are just our core. And now we have the governing structure. We have a council of 11 members. Of course, we are legislated under the Accountants Act, and our anchor ministry is the Ministry of Finance. Currently, we have a membership of council 11. 4 are appointed, and 7 are elected members. The 7th member is the chairman. So 1 represents the Capital Markets Authority for those who are appointed. The next one represents the Examination Board, CASNEP. And the next one represents the National Treasury. And the final one is also appointed by the CS National Treasury and Planning, but should not be a member of, should not be an accountant. Currently we are 10, so economists, you are an accountant, so the Treasury has been struggling to give us somebody because of ABCD. I won't talk about it. Honorable Ndindi, you can take up that. In terms of governance, I said we are 11 council members, headed by the chairman, and the vice chairman is normally elected by council members. 6 council members are elected by members. Thank you very much, members. His Excellency FCP Fernandez in absentia, as one of our former chairman of the institute. So let's positions or set them, but they are structured in a way that you'll find that there's an election for every year, because council members serve for 3 years and then another 3 years, and the chairman serves for only 2 years. So as we speak now, we have elected 3 council positions for those who have been following, and they fought background at the AGM. Now, these are just notable members who have been our chairman. We have had the 25th chairman of this group, and out of the 25, we have had only so those are, that's our journey. We have 25 of us sitting at the head. And one of them, if you look at the photo, is sitting before you, FCPL. So I'll continue because of time. We have a council of 11, but we run a secretariat which has 15 directorates under the CEO, and we have the CEO is also the secretary of the council. So the CEO runs the institute on a daily basis, and we have 5 directorates of member services, public policy, regulation, licensing, standards and professional services. The other one is, of course, the Directorate of Internal Audit, and the very last one is Finance Strategy, with a number of directors, of course, like HR, Supply Chain, Procurement, Legal Services, Business Development, and Communication. Still on governance, when the institute runs with 10 committees, and the committees are managed by members. There's a convener and a co-convener for the committees, and then members are selected through an application process, and they become members of the committee, and they serve for 2 years. Where we have the Public Sector Committee, Special Events Committee, Public Finance, and then the Legislative, and many others, including the Devolution Committee, which serves the branches. The Institute has 9 branches across the nation, which are physical with offices across the nation, mainly on the former provincial boundaries. So we have the Coast Branch with an office in Mombasa. We have Mount Kenya with an office in Nyeri, but we have avoided having a branch in Nairobi to ensure that people attend to to grow the branches across the nation. But we have gone global, and we have what we call chapters across the world. We have a chapter in South Africa, where we have our members under the various institutes in South Africa. We have the United Kingdom, a chapter there. We have Australia, and we have a chapter in coming up in Canada. Resources, this is very important for members of the upcoming economic society. We do not receive a single penny. When NDINDI NYORO is allocating money, as much as we fall under the National Treasury, we do not receive a single penny from the National Treasury. We sustain ourselves through members joining fees, annual subscriptions, annual license fees, consultancies, in-house trainings, rental income from our structure, which I'll talk about, and sponsorships from development partners. Mainly, our development partners include who have sponsored us for some time based on the concept papers we have put across, is the World Bank, the German corporation GIZ, the United Nations. We have also had some engagement with what we call the Business Advocacy Fund and Save the Children. So we look for money. We are not given. We have a membership, like I mentioned, of over 35,000 as we speak, and the members who are across the globe are in 41 different countries other than Kenya, and the examination board is able to also carry out examinations through the emphasis in those particular countries. We have several categories of members. We have the fellows. These are fellows who have done quite a lot to develop and support the professional Institute of Accountancy. So they will always be referred to as FCPA, Fellows of the Institute, and they go through a rigorous process before they are awarded the designation FCPA. And then we have full members who are CPAs under the category under Section 24 of the Act. And then we have associate members who are yet to get over 2 years experience, but they have no experience, but they are our members. They pay half subscriptions, and we have the trainee accountants. So the leadership of the Institute of Economists should be able to pick some of these things. The registration process is all automated, and you can be able to apply for registration immediately. To have 3 years experience, and CASNEP has now introduced another area of getting some knowledge on integrity and leadership. So all this is done online. You don't have to come to the institute. International affiliations, and the accountants who are here keep on asking why we may seem expensive. We are a member of the International Federation of Accountants, IFAC, which is headquartered in New York. And this is the body that regulates the accountancy profession across the world. Within it, we have various obligations that we must meet. So even CPDs are managed by the regulations of IFAC. Through IFAC, you'll find now the other international bodies that set standards. We have the International Accounting Standards Board. We have the IPSAS, International Public Sector Accounting Board, and all that. Being a real big PAO, Professional Accountants Body, we have a permanent seat, council seat at IFAC. So as the chairman of the institute, And then we have the board of directors. Kenya is lucky. We have FCPA Professor Nyamuto of the University of Nairobi sits as a board member of IFAC. And IFAC has various what we call member of obligations. They set out 7 of them, and just one of them is on quality assurance, international education standards, international standards on auditing, the code of ethics for professional accountants, among others. Still on international affiliations, the Institute is a member of PAFA, Pan-African Federation of has a permanent seat in PAFA, where we are actually board members of PAFA, and we are the 3rd largest professional body in Africa after Nigeria. And Canada. We've signed various MOUs with the professional bodies in these countries, and our members the institutes in Africa to come up, so the economic society would be an easier one for us. We've supported the formation of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Uganda to come up. We have supported the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Rwanda, OPC Burundi, the Institute of Accountants in Burundi, and currently, of course, through World Bank funding, and currently we are working on South Sudan, Ethiopia, DRC, and Somalia. But like I mentioned, we are members of IFAC, and we sit on the board of PAFA. We also have our members sitting on various committees of PAFA and IFAC through various international them is CPA John Awala of the National Treasury. He sits on the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. License presentation to your leadership and to the entire members of the upcoming Economists Society of Kenya. You'll go through the licenses we provide to our members, because we have multiple licenses, composite for audit and assurance, we have tax licenses, category T, and the rest. That is in public, in nature. We have accountants who carry out audit, and those who are in public space, and associate members. Guidelines. So we stand for a number of principles for accountants. One is grow. And one of the journeys is that the Institute set up the Kenya College of Accountancy in 1989, which has moved to become the KCA University, where the Institute is the sponsor and sits on the board of trustees. So from 1989 as Kenya College of Accountancy, and then it moved on, and now it's KCA University, where we train most of our accountants, including other colleges, Strathmore and the rest of the colleges. Now, in terms of moving forward, we had been on rendered buildings for quite some time, but our predecessors managed to have an idea. So around the 90s, from Standard Chartered Bank, it was a training center for Standard Chartered Bank, and through a loan, a mortgage, we were able to acquire the land where we have shared it with the university, and our offices are on Thika Road CPS Center, a 1.2 billion building. We rent it out and use around 3 floors, so that's where we also get our income. And through it, we were able as accountants to pay off the loan 7 years before time, saving around 110 million shillings. As a professional body, we have an examination board, which is CASNEP, which runs the examinations for accountants. And this, I will talk to your leaders very clearly. You can never become an accountant or a member of the institute by the mere fact that you have a degree in accounting. You must also go back to class and take a professional course with the CASNEP. Just like you cannot be an advocate of the High Court if you've not gone to the Kenya School of Law, whether you have a PhD in law, you must go back to the Kenya School of Law and get a diploma, and then you'll be admitted as an advocate. Exactly what we do, whether you have a PhD in accounting, you must go through CASNEP to become a member of the institute. Who are our stakeholders? Of course, the National Treasury, the Kenya Revenue Authority, Parliament. We are always in Parliament with Mheshimiwa here on issues of a lot of cooperation and engages with other regulators, the Capital Markets Authority, SASRA, the Central Bank of Kenya, FRC, that is financial reporting, IRA, and many others. Notable independent offices where we play a key role is the Office of the Auditor General, the Office of the Control of Banks, and we also sit at SRC just on advisory basis. But we also have a lot of engagements with the judiciary, especially on tax matters, and KEPSHA, KAMU, and other non-state agencies like the Transparency International, Amnesty, TISA, and many others. So we carry out quite a number of professional trainings across the world, and some of the important professional trainings and conferences, we have what we call the World Congress of Accountants, which comes after 4 years. We have ACOA, the African setup of the World Congress. We've just finished one for East Africa Congress of Accountants in Rwanda in Kigali, and we have other conferences like the Public Sector Conference, the Economic Symposium, where we call upon most of the economists to deliver their speeches, and research is part of what we do. But we are so automated that we also do webinars, online certification courses, and videos, and many others. Our events are physical and virtual, including our voting system is an automated system. We do not go lining up. We vote. The 35,000 vote while they are seated on their desk, among others. So what are the benefits of being a member of an institute? And from the perspective of ISPAC, we have what we call the ISPAC Benevolent Fund. Our subscriptions, I just heard your vice chair talk of 2,500 and talked about 5,000. Our subscriptions every year, a member pays 10,200. 1,200 goes to the benevolent fund, where it takes care of bereavement of your immediate family and your parents-in-laws. So the 1,200 goes there, and the 10,000 we have to subdivide it to pay the subscriptions to IFAC, to PAFA, and to the East African Institute of Accountants, which is for countries within Eastern Africa. And then our members are able to get tuition fees discount, 20% at the KCA University, that is on tuition fees, and library services. Credit facilities are in a number of places. We have motor vehicle repairs and leasing and motor vehicle insurance, quite a number. I may not get into it. But to support the society, we have what we call ISPAC Scholarship Fund, and we also carry out what we call the corporate social responsibility. We have a scholarship for the Institute, which started in 2015, I guess when FCPA Fernandez was the chairman. And it takes care of the tuition fees for 4 years, basic accommodation and pocket money for very needy cases of students who need to pursue accountancy at the university level and also at CPA level. But this you have to go through a process. We have 9 branches. That is where we also carry out quite a lot of CSR activities. And we've been able to put up kitchens and classrooms in various regions for people who are enabled differently, lavatories and water tanks in the dry areas. And we are really now pushing on climate issues, so we plant quite a number of trees across the nation. And we support the various small and medium enterprises through advisories on tax filing, bookkeeping, record keeping, among others. So each of these 9 branches receive averagely 450,000 from the Institute to be able to carry out their CSR activities, and of course members also contribute. I will leave it at that, Chairman, and that is the Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
So thank you very much, CPA Philip Kakai, for taking us through the journey of ISPAC. You can see we have just started. We haven't even reached the middle. But one thing for sure is that we are moving, okay? This forum in itself is giving us an opportunity to understand that there is something that we can do, and we need to collaborate with other bodies like ISPAC. You know, ISPAC is like our father, or should I say our mother. So they are already ahead of us. They are guiding us on what to do. They have our members. You can see Hillary there is the head of directorate, and he's our member, and yet he works for ISPAC. So you can see we have penetrated all these areas, and therefore we need their support. Without wasting much time, first again, I want to appreciate the presence of the governor for Kakamega County, Karibu Sana. I also come from Kakamega. I think we had this conversation yesterday. So this is the time for Honorable NDINDI NYORO, who is our member. He is a member of the Economist Society of Kenya. He is also the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly. Karibu Sana, Mheshimiwa.
Thank you very much, the chairman of the Economist Society of Kenya, Dr. Dunston, and the other officials. I can see the Vice Chair, Dr. Jaramba, Hilary, and all the other leaders of ESK. My brother, the governor for Kakamega, FCPA, Fernandez, Baraza, and of course the representative from the EACC, representing Bwana Twalib, Bwana Vincent, karibu sana, the MP for Kagema, Bwana Kihongi, and also all the other speakers and presenters, fellow economists, good afternoon. Actually, it's good morning. Good morning. I'll try to be very brief because the governor is already here also to talk to us. But it is important that I report to economists what has been happening around this row, especially for those who are behind to know. Vizuri niwaambie ile inaendelea hapa mbele. Because I'm sitting next to Vincent from EACC. And when Governor Fernandez came in, we were exchanging business cards. And then Honorable Governor saw the card, of course, with the logo of EACC, and he actually almost took off. Until I told him that Vincent is in the prevention department, and not the other department that we know. I also want to applaud Bwana Kakai for that very good presentation. At least now we have a good framework of where we are going, and especially in ESK. I will just note a few things. I will not attempt to do a speech, and especially a formal one, because it's also not my domain. So I will have a gumzo kidogo too. Then I pave way for the next person. I was talk about debt, and also the issue of economic growth and sustainability. And it's good I touch just a few more things before. I actually thought when I was coming that EACC have already presented. So I was to add something, just one point, before I go to my presentation. If you look at Africa, most of the young people in Africa, including those who are in this hall, even those who are in very good professions, even when you go to a university, for example, and you take randomly those people who want to become politicians, and if you can actually take the same alongside people who want to become entrepreneurs or any other area, you realize Kenya and Africa, most of the young people, they want to become politicians. And I wonder why. I am one of them, yes. But beyond the service, because I believe that every person wants to become a leader to serve, you realize that also personal interest, because you are all human, also play a part. And that plays a part because I believe in Africa opportunities are not as robust. And of course, the opportunity to extract political rent, so that then political rent or political capital becomes another factor of production. And I am sure I'm not speaking of something you don't know, because by the look of things, some of you work in government also. So that ability then motivates people to depart from areas that are very productive. When you go to the US, for example, most young people in universities want to go to Silicon Valley or Wall Street, because you are likely to become a billionaire by the route of Wall Street or Silicon Valley than you can in politics, because there the structures are already too refined for political rent to be extracted. And I hope, without criticizing, because I believe it's a level of democracy and the level of having institutions ambazo zimekomaa, that gradually we are reaching there as Kenya and as Africa, where most bright people, intelligent people, yes, some will come to leadership, but we'll also have a sizable number going into rural areas and especially areas around entrepreneurship, because we have scarcity of that. And how I see corruption, and I'm starting with it, beyond the one that we know of taking something from somebody to do something, in the magnitude of it, it also distorts economic incentives. Because if you can make 200 million by just doing 1, 2, 3 things without elaborating, an equivalent money where a listed company makes in their full year results as net profit, then definitely there is a distortion of economic incentive. Because for us human beings, the shorter the route, the better. And therefore, if there are shorter routes to get 100 million, 200 million, without having to do too much, then that route is more taken. But then in the entirety of things, it then distorts the whole fabric around entrepreneurship and around the economy, because people are more motivated to take the shorter route. And you can imagine if you can gain that kind of money I've mentioned, when the only factor of production is you and the position, and another listed company, for example, which has employed thousands of people, making the same in end of year profit in terms of net profit, then you can clearly see a distortion. That yes, this person engages a lot of factors, engages a lot of people, and therefore also, in some way, also plays a part in redistribution, and therefore deals with the issue of equality and equality at the same time. That economic disruption and distortion is, I think, what we need to gradually continue to decimate, so that people take a route of entrepreneurship, other than not just taking a route of politics, but also of private sector. Many times I wonder, and I'm sure Governor will bear me witness, why, if you look at Kenya, everyone wants to join government as a civil servant or the other route where we serve. I always wonder, for example, you see a person who is a very senior person in a private bank earning more than the salary of the president of Kenya, and they want to come in as a deputy director somewhere. Pengine mtanieleza tukimaliza hii hafla, because I'm also learning. But to go to what brought me here, I'm to touch something about the economy and also about debt. And first of all, I want to really applaud this organization, because for many years, most of us who are economists have had to hedge ourselves in other institutions to become professionals. But now at least we have a home. And because I'm going into what brought me here, so that I don't interrupt you as I do so, I came with so many friends, but I want to recognize two. And if you allow one, you'll greet us on behalf of the other. So I want to introduce one director of Coast Water, Bwana Barak, is here. Barak, wacha kufanya hivi, geuka watu waone wewe ni kijana bwana. Barak is a director hapa Coast Water. He's a very young lawyer actually, but soon of course he's becoming an economist. I also want now to recognize my friend, who I request to come and say hi, and my neighbor from home, the member for Kagema constituency, Honorable Peter Kehongi. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Dede, our chairman for budget. We have the CEO, Economist Society of Kenya, and all protocols observed. Habari zenu? Yeah, vile mmeambiwa, my name is Peter Kehongi. I'm the MP for Kagema, and I accompanied my brother, who told me he want to come and address the Economist Society of Kenya. I think this is one of the institutions that is in the head of many people, because this country was changed by an economist, Kibaki. And in our mind, when the language of economy is talked by a politician, it becomes so exciting whenever we understand what can be done. And I wish to tell you that is an institution we need to hear a lot, coming out to explain some of the things we are doing as a government, which you can give your opinion. Your opinion can be of great importance. I was thinking maybe when I board an aeroplane, sometimes you start wondering, ikienda juu, hakuna mtu ana, when it gets fought on the way, ni wachache sana, maybe they get an opportunity maybe to be rescued. But we have a lot of confidence with the engineers who work on these airplanes, and we have it because of the history. Now, when it comes to the economy of this country, like now we are doing the finance bill, and it's just to do with taxes and policies. We wish to be hearing the opinion of the economist. We need to be hearing the finance bill. It will give us confidence. Don't maybe think maybe you might be seen as if you are fighting the government, but your opinion is extremely important. Because sisi kama ambao hatujaenda hiyo mambo economists, we just grab in darkness. But your opinion can make us have some confidence of whether the country is getting to the right place or is not going to the right place. Therefore, we wish now that we have great people, we have our governor, we have now the budget chair, is the only executive chairman in parliament. The others is only the person who can execute. All the else chairmans, wao wanaleta kwake. But for him, is the only executive chairman. Is one of the biggest positions in parliament. Therefore, I wish you can use the positions to make your voice be heard and you become relevant in the government policies and the opinion that the government make. Kwa hivyo Bwana wabariki sana na nimeshukuru. We will be with you. Asante sana.
Thank you very much. You can see my neighbors are also very intelligent. Asante sana Kihongi. Kenya, wanauchumi wako hapa. First of all, as we talk about economics, watu wa chemistry, physics, they go into laboratories. But the laboratory of economists is history. What we go to look at whether it worked or not, policies especially, we go back to history. The beauty about it is that also, we are very empirical in nature. That whatever theory I may give you, figures then come to ratify whatever I am saying. And therefore it is important we use both. Where is Kenya now? So that even as we talk about our input as economists, we see where Kenya is, where our entry point could be. Last year, and I know you know because some of you actually work also for the National Treasury, Kenyan GDP grew by around 5.5%. There are some quarters that would say it's 5%, but either way, whichever source, it is around 5% to 5.5%. Now, if you tabulate comparatively, Kenya was number 28 in terms of the fastest growing economy in the world. That's one. It is important for us to underline that. A country like China, yes, it's big and has been growing in bouts and in double digits even previously. Last year, Kenya grew faster than China. Yes, I agree it's a big economy, but I am also saying figures are important to refer to. This year, Kenya is projected to grow at around 5.5 to 5.7%. Even China itself will be growing at around 5%. It is also modest and good. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, we are privileged, that there is a lot of work to be done in our economy, but at the very least, we are starting off at a very good pedestal. Second thing, and especially I'm referencing on my own experiences also, as the chairman of budget and as a person who's been very integral into the policies that we've been making, and especially in our government led by our president, Dr. William Samoei Ruto. And to say the same, I remember when we won, then I was very upbeat about the kind of thing we want to do. And we started meeting in Karen, where the official residence of the deputy president was then before he moved to State House as president. And we started meeting the National Treasury now to get where is Kenya. And I'm trying to relate all those figures together. And at some point, of course, the economic advisors of the president, you know them. At one point, David D was there for a meeting we had held from 10 a.m. to next day at around 4 a.m. 4 in the morning. We had a meeting in a tent. Then darkness came and almost light came the following morning. So David D was asking the president, after we now knew exactly how the economy was, then he was asking the president, tukipewa nafasi ingine utapigania hii kiti? Because we thought it was very easy to come and run things, because we thought they were the way we were seeing them. But I'm not trying to push any blame anywhere. That is not my domain. I just want us to understand the scenarios. Even those who are there did their best, and we applaud them for that. Now, our inflation was almost double digit, if you remember, in 2022. Of course, the inflation rate, our interest rate was slightly lower. And I'm talking about all these jargons because I'm sure everyone here understands them. So we had something to do. One, we had to make our economy grow in terms of GDP, because that's the only measure we know of growing, whether an economy is growing. Second, us and the regulators around the whole fabric, we needed to regulate the three critical markets. The three critical markets, and especially under the domain of the central bank, one being the prices of commodities, which of course we measure through inflation. The second market is the market of exchange rate, which we measure by how our currency is faring comparatively to other currencies. And the other market was the market of money. How expensive or cheap is money? So those three things were very important for us. And that is why I started with GDP. So, you know, we have a delicate thing to do, and especially when your position is dependent on votes. Because as you do the right thing, it also has to make sense to everyone. So when we started crafting these issues, one thing that was very, very heated by that time is that there was scarcity of food in the country. So we were almost leading people who are hungry, and a hungry man is an angry man. So we had to look at that market very fast. And I am happy. There are some of the things that we did. And I am being this blunt because everyone here is a policymaker in one way or the other in their institutions. So in the market of commodities, that is inflation, how were we to do for the inflation not to go to 10% upwards, to come lower? Two issues. One is fiscal policy, the other one is monetary policy. On the fiscal side, the issue was about production. Because as you know, the whole of global ecosystem, inflation was up because of COVID. COVID that brought a lot of money in the market through interventions by various governments. And then those interventions created more demand, and more demand created higher prices. So that's one. Second, disruption of supply chains. So what we did is that we looked inwards. That yes, Kenya is here as a country, which is part of the globe, but we are on our own also. So fiscal policy number one on food production. That is why you hear the issue about fertilizer. And I am glad now, at least as we lead, stomachs are not very bad. The second issue was exchange rate. Exchange rate is also a composition of many things. It is a composition of fiscal policy and also monetary policy. But then they are all intertwined. That is why I am summarizing all of them together. Because the same sword, the same toolbox that you get tools to deal with exchange rate is the same tools that you use for monetary policy, and somehow also they are the same that you use for inflation. So, exchange rate, we looked at it fiscally in terms of balance of payment, and especially in the current account. If I become too jargonistic, you can tell me, but I can see we are all together. So, on the fiscal side, you deal with the current account, export imports. How are we to make our exports better? We haven't yet succeeded, but we are headed in that direction. So we tabulated what we import most. One of the things we import most, number one, is fuel, ya magari na industries. Second highest import in the country is edible oils. Close to 150 billion shillings every year in edible oils. Hii mafuta wazee tunapikiwa nayo hapo jikoni, an aggregation of that, Kenya spends 150 billion every year to import that. So what were we to do then? Try to do import substitution. If you look at our budget previously and now, we are dealing with fiscal side inputs around edible oils. You will see sunflower there, you will see canola there, and anything else that assists Kenya in being at least close to self-sufficient in terms of edible oils. Then the last one, summarizing all the three markets. Now we were here, we wanted the shilling to gain. But on the other side, we also want inflation to come down. But on this other side, then you have interest rate to deal with. Now we have seen in the market, we have succeeded in bringing down inflation. We have also succeeded in strengthening our currency. But on the monetary side, then you see that our money is very expensive. Our interest rate is high. But why do that? It's because as economists you know that you cannot be expansionary as an economy and contractionary at the same time. You can't eat your cake and have it. So you can't be expansionary here giving money through tax breaks and the rest, and at the same time you are being contractionary. So exchange rate, we had to raise interest rate. Why? As I said before, exchange rate is a component of two major things: the current account and the capital account. So the current account you sort through fiscal policy, but the capital account you are dealing with net capital inflows. But what determines net capital inflows? It is CI minus CO, capital inflow minus capital outflow. Then you are here as Kenya having money. It's here, Kenyan money is here. US has raised the Fed for 11 times consecutively to 5.525%, crossing to 5.5%. The Bank of England is here raising interest rates. All the other economies are raising interest rates. Kenya is part of the world or the globe where, to some extent, capital permeates. So you are here now as central bank. And one of the components that will make your currency strong is when you have demand for your local currencies and less demand for the other currencies. So that is the reason why the CBK had to raise our interest rate to where it is now. So that you with money in Kenya and you are looking for fixed income instruments, you do not need to go for a dollar fixed instrument. You can still invest in Kenya shillings, get the amount that is now available in our markets, and therefore protect outflow, even if you don't attract a lot of inflows. And that is the whole ecosystem around where our economy is. Secondly, I'll talk very few points. I want to talk number 2 about budget, so that we close in. Budget, we are now in the budget making process in Kenya as we talk. In fact, the National Treasury just tabled the supplementary estimates 2 and the main budget for financial year 24-25. So let me talk about 24-25, because I would request, just Honorable Kehongi said, that we get, the more voices the better. The more Kenya becomes more open to many voices, the better, and especially very considered opinions, like of the people in this hall. No, now, our budget policy statement, we had made ceilings to a tune of 4.1 trillion Kenya shillings. But in the estimates, we have revised that downwards. And our current budget that we are making is around 3.93 trillion Kenya shillings. 3.913 actually. And I want to go slowly here because this is our domain, people here. So 3.9 something, so we have climbed down. Even if I'm not very exact, it's because budget making process, you only become certain about figures when it is already approved by Parliament. But these are tentative figures which have been submitted by the National Treasury. Out of that, the revenue side of our budget, ordinary revenue that we anticipate to collect, as you know, budgets are projections. It's never certain, including household budgets. So 2.9 trillion ordinary revenue. A that we project to collect 441 billion Kenya shillings. A, you know what A is. Those who are in parastatals that collect money and you spend at source, that is A. The money you pay in a hospital, which is government, it becomes revenue for government, it's A. The money you pay for passports, that becomes revenue for government, is not part of ordinary revenue, but is A. That's 441 billion Kenya shillings. Grants will be around 51 billion. Now, I am proud about the other figure I'm to give. I'm very proud about it. If you look at our budget policy statement, we had projected to have a deficit of 703 to 720 thereabout billion, depending on which budget, the one submitted or the one that we ended up approving in terms of budget policy statement. Currently, we have revised that downwards, that our deficit in Kenya is only 5.14, is only 514 billion Kenya shillings. I'll highlight what that means and why I'm excited. Let me go to the revenues, to the expenditure side. And I bear that you become keen. You see clearly as economists where we must point our eyes. Our recurrent national government expenditure, recurrent in national government alone, is 1.6 trillion. Recurrent of national expenditure alone. Sijaweka governors. Recurrent national expenditure. Out of that, around half of that, around, is PE, personal emoluments. Salaries, in other words. Development in the current budget we are making, 730 billion. You already see now why I'm reading these figures. Development, 730 billion Kenya shillings. Monies to counties, shareable revenue, 391 billion. It is still contested. Governors are already also negotiating and we'll come to a conclusion, but tentatively now, we are dealing with 391 billion Kenya shillings. CFS, Consolidated Fund Services, 1.2 trillion. Can you just look at those figures as an economist before I proceed? Because I can see you writing. Just look at them. And especially look at what I've read in terms of the economy as an aggregation of households. And you are the household. And look at that budget in a household setup. Just look at those figures because they form part of the biggest basis of government policy, and especially economic-wise. So, look at the expenditure side. 1.6 trillion Kenya shillings recurrent. 730 billion development. Forget about the counties. CFS, 1.213 trillion. What is CFS? What is this thing we are calling CFS? It is 1.08 trillion going into payments of interest rates for the public debt. 1.08 trillion is going into the payments, not of principal, of interest rates, both domestic and external. Domestic, Kenyans will be pocketing over 750 billion Kenya shillings in interest paid by government. Domestic debt. So the other one part of CFS is pensions, which is, they form part of the first charge in budget making process, but also in release of exchequer. So when I'm doing the budget, the things I don't negotiate. First of all, I put CFS where it should be. Whether it comes rationalization, you don't touch. So you only touch what? Development. When you are rationalizing the budget, the sacrosanct number one, you can't touch CFS because you have to pay your obligations and you have to pay pensions. The second thing that then we put safe is PE, salaries for the civil servants. Because you can't start negotiating at, you know, economy haifanyi mzuri, ugoja kidogo. What becomes the casualty? When you hear there is a fiscal consolidation, the casualty number one all the time is domestic development budget. All the time. Just look for the entire existence of budget making process in Kenya. So that aside, I know you have made some sense of these figures. Now, on the revenue side, I talked about deficit of 514. The reason I am excited, when we came in less than 2 years ago, if you look at the then budget, the deficit to GDP ratio in Kenya was around over 7%. 7%. In the budget policy statement, we estimated it at around 3.9% when it was over 700 billion. Now we are making a budget that Kenya has not seen for the last like 15 years, where our deficit as a measure of GDP will only be 2.9%. Please clap for me. Lakini hii ya kuitisha ni balaa. So, and not me, of course, it is the entire everyone, all Kenyans together, because when you hear the deficit is down, something will pay for it. And that something will be development, definitely. Now, I don't know whether I'm making sense with all these jargons, because I could be talking to myself. Because I think I'm too technical. Tuko sawa? Okay. Now, debt. We talk about debt all the time. Kenya, of course, is between 10 to 11 trillion. The reason why you can't say about debt with certainty, now in the markets, exchange rates is changing. So, the debt in the morning is different from the debt in the evening. So it's around 10 to 11 trillion. The only thing I want to isolate there, because I was talking about debt, why can't we borrow? Because all the other growing economies borrow anyway. And we have empirical evidence to show that the US debt to GDP ratio is over 120%. That Japan is over 260%. And Kenya is below 70%. And especially by using the nominal GDP of 18 trillion. Why can't we borrow? Then why can't we as economists then come up with a theory in a paper, those who are doing masters? Borrowing as a tool for economic growth. Why can't one of us then come up with that kind of a paper? And I'm giving my opinions. I am not an authority per se. These are my opinions. Japan. You know, when, unless the policy maker wants to borrow, they say big economies are borrowing. And they cite the US, the UK, and of course Japan comes in handy to justify. But you have refused to go that route. Why? Currently, the US debt is over 32 trillion Kenya shillings, the US debt. But then in borrowing, number one, you look at the use. When you borrow, this money is going into doing what? Because if you are borrowing and the money cannot generate more money within the economy, then stop borrowing. And that's what we are precisely doing. Number two, you look at interest rate. Our domestic debt as a composition of the entire debt and the external debt is 50-50. So when you talk about 10 trillion debt, 5 trillion is domestic and 5 trillion, give or take, is foreign. Out of that, our major debt, which is foreign, is dollar denominated. So when you have a variation in currency, which you may not have a lot of control when you are in a floating exchange rate regime, then you are trying to borrow and jump into a hole where you don't know it is up to what depth. So that's one of the reasons why we cannot continue perpetuating over borrowing. Because we don't have a lot of control over the gymnastics around exchange rate. Second, and maybe the last, because the rest you know, Japan. If you study the economy of Japan, since 1994, for 30 years, the GDP of Japan, in real terms, economics, you know you have real and nominal. If you deflate the Japanese economy, it has not grown in real terms for 30 years. But then, why am I saying that? How is it related? Japan has a 260% debt to GDP ratio. But why can't we compare ourselves with Japan? The major thing is this. Two, cost. Number one is cost. Number two is something I'll call net off. Cost. Do you know Japanese government does business with borrowing? Do you know part of how Japanese government raises money is the business that I'm talking about of debt? If you check, you can Google later. Before COVID, there is a time you could buy a 10-year bond, a Japanese 10-year bond at negative interest rate. Can you imagine? In Kenya now, we are talking about infrastructure bond of 18%. Japan, negative. That's one, cost. Second, net off. Can you do for me empirically how many countries Kenya has lent money? Kenya is a debtor, but is it a creditor? Or the other way around? Just tell me, because you are economists, how many countries has Kenya lent money? Anyone with an idea? Maybe silence means if you don't know. Look at Japan. When we are talking about the US having 32 trillion Kenya shillings in public debt, the number one external lender of the US government is Japan. But at what rate? Now you try to see. How much have they borrowed at? How much have they given the US at? That's the reason why comparing a thriving, growing economy to those in terms of borrowing, you only do it when you are lazy. So when you see me on TV one day justifying we are borrowing because Japan is borrowing, no, these guys have started to be lazy. Because there is no comparison. Let me come to the close by the last point. As we think now as economists, I'm just provoking ourselves. We have read many theories in economics. Mercantilists, we know them. That trading alone makes a lot of sense in economic growth. We have read about physiocrats. Physiocrats, they say, no. Agriculture is the main thing in economic growth. That the only productive sector in an economy is agriculture. Because the others, you only transform the factors. But then, why must we focus on as economists? This is my opinion. Looking at the US, the UK, the Asian tigers, one thing that we must continually improve in Kenya, in Africa, in all developing countries is capital accumulation. If you look at Kenya, how much capital is allocated to every Kenyan who is a worker? Look at Japan, for example. Look at Germany. Germany, you see capital per worker per person reached optimum many years ago. So the most they can do is to maintain, because there is no more growth to do in terms of capital per worker. If you look at all those economies, including China, when we talk about China in manufacturing, we are basically talking about accumulation of capital, because the major component of manufacturing is capital itself. Because then you look at Kenya, for example, the reason why we are agrarian now is because our number one priority is not even to create quality jobs. Number one priority is to engage everyone. Because there are so many people without jobs. So when you're a policy maker, number one thing that you're doing is first of all to know, how do I engage as many Kenyans as possible? So the question of how am I engaging Kenyans becomes secondary. And I think then, as policymakers, we need to move in tandem. Because what would we rather have? Labor-intensive industries where everyone is employed with very low productivity, or then we have a sizable number of people unemployed, but those people who are working are optimally utilized. I don't need an answer. I'm just provoking our mind. The other thing, just a few things about what we are doing in government as I close. Poleni, nimechanganya vitu mingi because the topic is too wide. People are saying, no. You people, KICC and all the other parastatals. Privatization, that's the one I'm talking about. I don't want to be explicit because I see cameras here. And I don't want to be misquoted. Now, as an economist, you are seated here. What is the role of government? From where I sit, if the government guarantees me security, guarantees me property rights, guarantees me enforcement of my rights, and gives me a conducive environment, my opinion, it should leave me alone from there. Because the interactions between private sector, between economic agents, make much more sense than the government offering services. Now, Kenya has over 300 institutions. Some are commercial in nature. When government comes in, you know, when we are in economic classes, we say one of the reasons for market failure is public goods. How is banking a public good? That the government of Kenya owns a bank. How many people here, I can say it because it's public, how many people have an account in Consolidated Bank of Kenya? Do you know? Now, let me also say this. How many of you who your grandmother has ever boarded a plane? I'm not even asking about, of course, many of us flew here. Now, do you know why I'm asking that? The tax my grandmother pays in the village as VAT. Can you imagine? At over 40 billion of that in a year goes into bidding KQ. My grandmother pays rent, pays tax as VAT in even salt, so to say. It bills you to come to MOMBASA through KQ. So what am I asking? Why is the government engaging in areas where private sector is already doing so well? And in sectors that are already so profitable, you find government institutions doing so badly. Look at banking sector in Kenya. It has been growing every year. Look at the government institutions within that banking sector. Look at how they perform. And you can't cite KCB because KCB is very different. It is run as a private sector. So all these things we are doing because government to be efficient must be lean. And the reason why we want to dispose of all these things by way of either leasing, some even selling through IPOs, and others, of course, through other methods, is because we cannot continue now talking about the budget I read here to you, and the deficit you are taking, borrowing, is coming to bail out a company that is not strategic in nature in terms of governance. And that is the reason why we are doing what we are doing. Very lastly, this is not economic, but maybe it's Pakish, not economists. Kenya, we are here as Kenyans now. What do we do mostly? You get a tender, you get employed, immediately here, all of us have plots. All. If you don't have, you already have a lot of buying a plot. I am sure. You know why I'm very excited about housing program that the president is leading? If you look at Kenya, we have had a distortion. When my sister is a teacher, when she retires, kujenga nyumba flat. When you retire here, your biggest insurance when you retire here, I am sure, you are building a flat already. Already. The reason why I'm very excited about the housing program, it will make us focus our capital elsewhere. If all the money we put into building flats every year, that money went to buying this machinery and the other one and the other one, the capital per worker I talked about increases. Kenya definitely grows at a much higher rate than the one we would grow by building flats. Second, you have a plot in Roiro and another one in your hometown. You've also bought a plot, Pare Busia. You have a plot in Kirifi, those who come from here, and you call your uncle, your mother, and itaftie kaploti. We all buying plots here. Now, when you are doing profit loss, and you are doing asset and liabilities, for you, not for the country, those plots you end up buying, where do you put them? As assets or liabilities? Some of you have 8 plots, 3, 4, 5. Now, this plot when you buy, and you have a plot of 100 by 100 somewhere, what comes to you as the owner of the plot? One is security for the plot. Usiende upate mchanga imemwagwa hapo, ama lori ya kakoto. So what do you do immediately? You're bringing somebody to look after your plot. Then the other one you have in Kisumu Dala. You also take another person to look after your plot. So when you do your monthly revenues for a business, you have somewhere for the salary. What is the outflow? Yes, food, school fees. The other outflows, plot ya MOMBASA nalipa caretaker, plot ya Kisumu Dala nalipa caretaker. So is that an asset or liability? Food for thought. Please, as we move out of here, this is my own opinion. I've been in the stock market for some time, which you know. I don't need to hide because I also don't like hiding under proxy accounts and the rest. As an economist who has gone and done predictions in class, because we work with predictions, time series data and such. When you look at Kenya now, those who have been investing in fixed income instruments like treasury bonds and bills, and also who've been investing in infrastructure bonds, I want you to go and think, is that trade likely to continue on an upward trend? Are we likely to buy infrastructure bond at 20% or actually lower than you bought last month? What am I trying to say? When the economy grows like this, interest rates are going up, they can only start going down. And I can guarantee it's very unlikely that the Fed rate is going to go higher. And therefore that the CBR rate is likely to go higher. So when there is a signal of CBR going lower, what happens to fixed income instruments? Think about it as an economist. And therefore, so that you know the monies you have currently. Now, when the rates are going up, stocks market gets beaten. So you see share prices are already too low. Kenya is a classic example. And I can dare you that the next time you are coming for economic conference, Kenya in 2024 is likely to be among the best performing markets in terms of stock markets in the world. What you do with that information is up to you. When you hear the government is saying, and the president himself says, companies owned by government will be giving a dividend payout of 80%. When you hear of such, as an economist here with a master's, and you hear that and you go home, what comes to your mind? How many companies that the government has a stake which are listed, which you can also own, and therefore, together with government, uchikirie koti ya serikali? So that when they are paying dividend, you know they are not only paying to government, they'll be paying to other shareholders. What you do with that information is up to you. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Tupigie mheshimiwa makofi tena. So I think economists, you have learned something from Mheshimiwa. I'm very sure some of you can see the blend between economics and finance. Okay, he has talked about capital markets, he has also talked about investment and so on. So are we benefiting from this conference? Yes. Thank you very much. So because we still have some time before lunch, we need to quickly go to His Excellency FCPA Fernandez Baraza to quickly go through his presentation. And his presentation is on mainstreaming public-private partnerships in counties as a tool for resource mobilization. Karibu sana mheshimiwa.
Yeah, you know, when you come after a practicing economist has just left the stage, it's very difficult. I want to appreciate the chair budget, Mheshimiwa NDINDI NYORO, for highlighting some of the numbers which have always been a contradiction, especially when the public is trying to understand how its government are trying to make sure that Kenyans have food on the table. The chair of ESK, Dr. Dunston Ilwodi, the vice chair, chair of budget, Mheshimiwa NDINDI NYORO, MP for Kangema, Mheshimiwa Kihungi, all the invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First, I want to appreciate the ESK leadership for inviting me to this inaugural annual national conference. Just having listened to the 25th chair of the institute, you can clearly see that the journey of 1,000 miles started with one step. I'm very proud to have served as the chair, the 21st chair of the institute, and some of those hard decisions that you are making 8 years or 9 years ago, you can clearly see they have actually put the institute to a trajectory that most of the professions are now looking at the institute as a very successful institute. So for you to have a good future, you must make hard decisions. And that's what we did in establishing the CPS Center. It was very hard, but members were very committed. So as leaders, we are expected to provide leadership. And that is why I'm very excited by the theme of this conference, where as professionals, we have to provide leadership in matters of economic growth. What role do we play as professionals in thought leadership? And the only way for us to influence policy, really, is to be on the table of policy making. I know as professionals, you can contribute in terms of the budget making process, but the only sure bet of economists, accountants, influencing policy is you have to seek for elective positions. Let's have more economists in parliament. Let's have more accountants in parliament, starting even at the county assembly. You can imagine our MCS are the ones who oversight the governors. So let us be on that table to influence policy, and that is the only way our economic growth can be guaranteed. So this conference is coming at the right time, where we are talking about economic growth and all the myths around the issue of public debt. I want to appreciate the chair of budget for unpacking some of the numbers and also helping us to understand why do we have debt? Why do we always borrow? And when we look at the comparative number that is provided, especially by highlighting the developing countries who have over 100% debt to GDP ratio, what that tells you is that Kenya, we still have a long way to go, and it's not so bad to borrow. The only important thing is what are we doing, or what projects are we utilizing for the money that we borrow. I know counties are the most misunderstood institutions. You can clearly see from what the chair was presenting, quickly highlighting the budget process, the numbers that we expect in terms of the growth in the ordinary revenue from around 2.5 trillion to 2.9 trillion Kenya shillings. But when it comes to counties asking for money, what comes out is counties are wasteful. The challenge we have in the counties really is that resources don't follow functions. Those are some of the key principles of PFM, where there's so much that we're expected to do. And for your information, in 2024, 2025 public policy statement, the budget policy statement, whatever that we have been allocated is 391 billion Kenya shillings, which is representing only an increase of less than 6 billion Kenya shillings to be shared amongst 47 counties. But when you go to the nitty-gritties, I like what the Treasury always puts out: program-based budgeting, itemized budgeting. But when you go to the nitty-gritties, what I want, my brother NDINDI NYORO, when you are highlighting those budget numbers, let us not have money being put in ministries doing functions which are devolved. For example, in the Ministry of Agriculture, agriculture is a devolved function, and you don't see why the national government should be the one procuring fertilizer for the counties. Go to the Ministry of Health. Am I saying something? When you look at the Ministry of Health, we have devolved health functions. The current challenges that we have with the doctor strike, the issue of internship, yes, those are issues which can be managed. But health, for us to grow counties, let us have the spirit, the political goodwill, so that the functions which have been devolved, we have attendant resources so that we can be effective. I've seen some programs where the national government is constructing markets, and yet those are the functions being done by the counties. Our constitution was very clear in terms of the fourth schedule on items and the programs which must be devolved, like roads. I know that's a very tricky conversation, where our members of the National Assembly believe that they must do roads in the counties. And yet, we as the people on the ground, where the rubber meets the road, we are expected to do all the roads. And yet, 80% of the money is still being devolved, or rather being held by the national government through Kera, Kura, you know. So what I'm trying to say here is, as accountants, as economists, as leaders, for us to provide leadership for economic growth, we must respect our constitution. We must walk the talk. I know in the last devolution conference, our president committed that is going to ensure all the functions which have not been devolved, they're still being undertaken by the national government. He gave a timeline of 6 months, and I was very keen to just look at the budget policy statement of 2024-2025. We don't have any indication from the national government that some of those funds will be devolved to the counties. So what we are saying here is, in terms of political leadership, I know my brother NDINDI NYORO is very much alive to the fact that for us to make progress in the counties, I think we need to have that collaboration. And I like the fact that this bottom-up economic transformation agenda, the focus should be at the bottom. And the bottom is the counties. Am I saying something? So what I'm saying here is, when you walk the talk as leaders, then I can assure you the numbers in terms of economic growth will not be talking about even 5.7%. We can even be talking about double digits in terms of economic growth if production is focused at the bottom, and the bottom of the pyramid is empowering counties so that we can have more resources. I just thought I need to digress a bit so that I can bring together my thoughts as the chair of finance at COG, and also to just appreciate what NDINDI NYORO has said, but we are still looking forward for a better understanding of what the counties are expected to be given in terms of monies to deal with specific items. For example, the doctors have just been on strike. It's almost 2 months. And going forward, we'll need to implement the CBA. For us to implement the CBA, we need around 5.8 billion shillings. That's already a number. We have the medical equipment services, which the national government has been incurring on behalf of the 47 counties. On average, we require to procure new CT scan equipment, which have already expired. This function was being done by the national government through the Ministry of Health. It is now counties that are supposed to make sure that we have serviceable and new medical equipment. We require almost 20 billion Kenya shillings. The levies which we've talked about, which again you are implementing because you are good citizens, we require almost 4.8 billion. So when you look at those itemized numbers, my brother NDINDI NYORO, when I come to the budget committee requesting for more money, it's not because we are wasteful, but because we want to serve Kenyans better. And on average, you can clearly see that we require a minimum of almost 32 billion Kenya shillings without even considering the road maintenance levy, which has been a big conversation. So we'll continue engaging with the national government, but maybe going forward as economists, some of the policy reforms that we require for us to make a progress on the division of revenue allocation. Maybe just as a thought, it is the highest time that we had the National Treasury being independent of the Ministry of Finance. Just a thought. So that national government does not hold National Treasury at ransom. Let's have the Ministry of Finance doing the budgeting process, but we have the National Treasury that we look at equitable revenue share between the national government and the counties. That is food for thought for economists. My topic was looking at how do we mainstream the public-private partnerships in the counties as a tool for resource mobilization. The PFM Act provides for three main sources of financing counties, and the first one being the equitable share, which largely comes from the National Treasury. We have the on-source revenue, which again has been curtailed because of the PFM Act. We only collect money on property and entertainment tax and a few levies. And then, of course, we also have conditional grants, which again come with their own conditions. Like the most interesting one, which I'm happy that it is now behind us, is where the counties were required to sign intergovernmental agreements before you access a conditional grant. You can imagine you have been given money, but it's just on paper. For you to access, let's say, 20 billion for FLOCA, you need to have signed intergovernmental agreements between the counties and the National Treasury. And before the intergovernmental agreements have been signed, you need to go to your county assemblies, and you know how the county assemblies are. We have already conditions precedent. After that, you go for public participation. So all that process will take a minimum of 6 months to 9 months. And some of those conditional grants have deadlines. So issues around conditional grants, we are happy to have it as a budget item. But let us also try to be a bit flexible in terms of access. And this is a conversation that I want our brothers in the National Treasury, especially our economists, at least to have some favorable consideration to counties, because when you give counties money which they cannot access, definitely you have a challenge. And the last source of revenue, or rather financing of counties, is through debt. And that is an item that we have never succeeded. In the history of devolution, it is only Laikipia County that attempted to do an infrastructure bond of 2 billion Kenya shillings. But unfortunately, around 2022 May, when the politics of this country had reached fever pitch, it was very difficult for the Senate to approve the infrastructure bond for Laikipia County. And that tells you that we have an opportunity to look at other sources of financing county programs. And that is why it is very important for us to consider the public-private partnerships as a source of financing our counties. Of course, on-source revenue has its own challenges. So far, what counties are expected to collect from the on-source revenue, we are only doing 20% because of a myriad of challenges, and I'm very happy that the National Treasury is coming up with a framework of making sure that we have uniform system of revenue collection, which of course we have given our views that it should be staggered. Counties which have invested in revenue collection systems must be given an opportunity to see off those contracts. Those counties which don't have a revenue collection system, those fellows who are collecting money manually, should be onboarded on this integrated county revenue management system for purposes of enhancing our on-source revenue. But going forward, I think PPPs is the way to go. When you look at the history of PPPs in the country, especially on the legal framework, we have the PPP Act for the counties that was reviewed in 2021. And now what we need is to have operationalization of the PPP framework so that counties can access this financing. Nationally, we've seen what PPPs have done. For those who happen to visit Nairobi, you can see our expressway. That is a product of PPP. We've seen the SGR is also a very good product of PPPs. And we also have other programs in the energy sector which have been successfully delivered through PPP programs. So in the counties, I think we have an opportunity. We've been having discussions with the Commission on Revenue Allocation on how we can optimize debt as an alternative of financing counties. And besides that, definitely having those public-private partnership programs is the way to go. But we need to ask ourselves, after the enactment of the PPP Act for counties in 2021, because nationally we have the PPP Act that came in force in 2013, how far have we progressed on this? And I have to say here honestly that for the counties we have not made any significant progress on PPPs because of some of the challenges, inherent challenges, starting from the legal issues around procurement and financing. It takes a long time to push through a successful PPP program, even at national level. So as policy analysts, we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to do so that this alternative source of financing counties should be enhanced? We need to look at the financing of these programs. What are the interest rates involved? We need to look at the reasons why we have not had successful programs being implemented in the counties. What are the legal frameworks? Are the persons doing those programs, are they being well trained? Issues around capacity building. And this is where the PPP unit at the National Treasury needs to have at least some units in the county, the way we have the control of budget, for us to have effective implementation of the PPP programs. We want also to decentralize the functions of the PPP unit in the counties. Let's have coordinators in counties so that when you have programs that cannot be financed by our normal budgets through exchequer, through on source revenue, we have a dedicated team in the counties that can onboard some of those programs. Do we have the structures in place to implement the PPP programs? I know most of the private participants, they want to deal with a unit that has a balance sheet. They want to deal with a unit that is not so bureaucratic in terms of procurement because of the time value of money. And that is where, as economists, as people who influence policy in our workplace, especially in the counties, how do we onboard? How do we bring those to influence the operationalization of the PPP Act for counties? So we have an opportunity as professionals. As I said, there are various areas which I just want to highlight, which can be successfully be implemented through the PPP programs. Transport in cities and metropolis counties, that's an area that we can actually leverage on the PPPs. Manufacturing, maize milling, tea processing, coffee processing, among others. The entire agricultural value chains, we can onboard our private partners so that we can basically have those programs being implemented. Of course, fish processing, edible oils, which my brother NDINDI mentioned about, agriculture, and the entire value chain around agribusiness, we have opportunities. And this is where we want to appreciate the national government, again, for supporting counties to come up with the county aggregation and industrial parks, where we have the investors coming around to optimize on the agricultural value chains, on the fish factories, on the livestock value chains. Those are opportunities for financing projects. under PPP. In the service sector, tourism, hospitality, cable cars, conference facilities, those are opportunities which we can leverage on in terms of onboarding PPP programs. In health sector, facilities. For example, in Kakamega County, we have the largest referral hospital being constructed, a 750-bed capacity, level 6 referral hospital. Once completed, comprising of 14 counties. But the challenge we have is now the equipping and operationalization of this facility. So those are some of the areas where I know our PPP framework is very useful. When you look at the frameworks which are in place, we need again to bring on board PPPs so that we can implement a project. I know it's being done scratching the surface because there are immense opportunities in the counties. Some of the initiatives which governance is doing to upscale PPPs in the counties, as I said, we have developed a bankable last year, and of course, starting from the county aggregation and industrial parks, we believe that once those programs are completed, then you are going to have proper onboarding. Capacity building is very crucial for our chief officers, our CECs, and also our directors in charge of those programs. We need to capacity build our people so that when we have those programs being rolled out, we don't have challenges. We have potential in the counties, as I said. What we need is to have our people, especially the professionals, taking a leadership role. In terms of maybe if I can domesticate county, we are expected to have a framework in place for you to attract investors or private partners. You must demonstrate that you have put the necessary infrastructure, and one of them is we have set up specific special purpose vehicles for onboarding PPPs. We have the Kakamega County Investment and Development Agency. We have the Kakamega County Dairy Development Corporation. Those SPVs have been given specific TORs of running with various value chains in agriculture, in agribusiness, and also in livestock value chains. So when you have those specific SPVs, that provides the framework for onboarding PPPs. As a county, we are also putting up infrastructure, which is very crucial. And that's why when we talk about RMLF, let's have counties doing the infrastructure, the roads. When we have the industrial parks, an investor can only come to that area if the infrastructure is there. For example, we have attracted some investors from the US. We had a very successful investment conference, signed various contracts and MOUs. One of them is establishing an organic fertilizer plant in one of our sub-counties in Kakamega, in Mumiazi West, at a cost of 1.7 billion Kenya shillings. And the investor was able to come there because we have provided land, almost 50 acres. We are doing bitumen roads through the Kenya Urban Support Program. We are doing the housing programs. We are doing roads. So as a private investor, once the facilities and the infrastructure has been provided by the counties, then it becomes a motivator for them to come and invest there. We signed various MOUs in terms of upgrading our mini grids in the county. There is an investor who is coming from Germany called Hydrobox. where we signed an MOU for constructing 4 mini grids through hydro. We expected to generate around 30 megawatts of hydropower. Of course, part of it will be used within the county, and then the balance can be exported to the national grid. We have also signed MOUs for gold mining. In Kakamega, we have coal deposits of almost 500 billion Kenya shillings. And those are the numbers which I can see NDINDI NYORO is very happy. You know, when you talk about billions, that's now when the chairman of budget is like, wait a minute. We have a lot of unexploited potential in mining. And this is an area that I know the national government has given a lot of focus, specifically in Kakamega, in my sub-county called Ikolomani. We have gold deposits of almost 500 billion. We've signed an MOU for establishment of a gold refinery, which is done through the Ministry of Mining. And of course, now the next thing is to operationalize the Mining Act, so that the royalties which are supposed to be shared in a ratio of 70-20-10%, 70 going to the national government. So my brother, you have an opportunity of dealing with the budget deficit. If we can invest more in the mining sector, these budget deficits that we talked about of only 500 billion can be addressed as one of the areas which the president has also invested a lot in production. So we have opportunities which have not been exploited. So as a way forward, we need at least to come up with specific policy papers, just to make sure that the challenges that we have on onboarding PPPs are addressed by having proper special purpose vehicles being established in the counties. That's one of them. Of course, investors are looking for bankable projects, which once they put in their money, they have, of course, a realization of their initial capital. We also need to have capacity building of our teams, especially those who are involved in the PPPs, starting from the National Treasury, the PPP unit. And I've said we need to consider decentralizing some of the coordinators in the counties. And more importantly, on the procurement side, let us review, as we look at the operationalization of the PPP Act, the regulation should make it easier for our private partners to establish their programs here, because if it takes 5 years to set up a program, then you can definitely see the time lag will not really help us to realize our potential in optimizing our PPP as a resource mobilization strategy. I don't want to speak much. I know we have an opportunity for interacting with you. Mine is to assure you that I'm very committed to support the Economist Society of Kenya. This inaugural annual national conference. I'm very excited, and I know going forward, I'm not a member of this institution. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Governor, and all the speakers. At this point in time, I would wish to present our speakers some locally made, and because they are locally made, it means that we have created some employment somewhere in this country. Is that not the case? So what we are saying is that we want to encourage local production. Mheshimiwa, I agree with you, and that will really help us to reduce the unemployment cases and therefore help our people. So I would request kindly the speaker, Mheshimiwa Governor and MP, we would wish to present some gifts to you and take a photo with ourselves. You can come to the podium here. Sorry? Sorry, speakers, Kakai also come. So the Vice Chair will do the presentation. Karibu sana, Vice Chair. Now you can maybe move it over so that we take a photograph.
Kidogo. It needs to chair. You need to be in the center. Or like this. You are the chair. Okay.
So thank you very much for that, being patient up to now. Now we will break for lunch. And after lunch, we have more speakers lined up.